Welcome to the first workshop on process characterization. In this workshop, you'll be able to gain experience in terms of testing the process to determine a process response. In the first step of this exercise, you'll introduce a step change into the process and observe the response of the process and identify the characteristics of that process response. In the second step of the exercise, you'll repeat that test to determine if you get the same results. For this workshop, there's a dynamic process simulation that will be used. You'll be able to introduce a change into the process through the AO block and observe the response of the process using the AI block. To get started in our exercise, we'll go to our workspace, and through the AO block, we'll introduce a step change into the process. So by changing the set point of our AO block from 40 to 50%, we'll introduce a 10% step change into the process. As we see, the change is immediately input into the process. There's some delay in terms of the process starting to respond, and after a time we start to see it respond to the input change, and that's reflected in the analog input-output. To better visualize the process response, we can look at the chart. As we can see, at about 16 seconds after the minute, we introduced a step change. But we didn't see the process output respond until about 26 seconds after the minute. So we have about a 10-second process dead time. The time from first responding to getting to 63% of change, which is at about 56 seconds past the minute, then is a 30-second process time constant. The change in the process output eventually reflects about the same amount of change as in the process input. That is, change in output over change in input is 1, so our process gain is 1. To repeat our test, we'll change the process output from 50%, process input from 50% to 60%. When we make that change, again we see that the input to a process immediately changes, but the process output doesn't really reflect that for a period of time and then starts to respond to the input change. This change then is reflected in our analog input. To look at this on our chart, we notice that about 5 seconds past the minute, we introduce a step change about 15 seconds past the minute, or 10-second delay. We see the process start to respond. At about 45 seconds past the minute, we see we're at 63% of change. So again, we get about a 30-second process time constant. The change in output over change in input again is about equal in magnitude where things settle out, and so our process gain in this second input is also 1. In terms of characterizing process, we would characterize it as a self-regulating process, since it eventually settles out for an input change that has a dead time of 10 seconds, a time constant of 30 seconds, and a process gain of 1. We hope this exercise has been helpful to you in seeing the steps required to test a process, to identify it, and to characterize the process.